Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in beautiful Los Angeles, California. Today we're going to be talking in our critter chat about sea turtles, which are one of my favorite species. I love learning about them, I love watching them, I love hearing more things about them, and I'm excited to share with you today about one of my favorite kinds of animals. To start off with, there are 7 different species of sea turtles. They can be found worldwide with the exception of the poles. So they're not up at the North Pole, they're not down at the South Pole. Most of them typically prefer warmer waters, so they're going to be more common in tropical or subtropical areas, but they can be found in all oceans otherwise. I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about each species and then talk a bit about some commonalities between them all and also some of the threats that they face in the wild and ways that we can help. So to start off with, I'm going to talk about the biggest species of sea turtle, which is called the leatherback sea turtle. Leatherback sea turtles are huge. They are the size of a small car. They have measured one individual at 2,200 pounds, so that's the biggest one they've ever found, and that individual was over 12 feet in length. So that's the size of a small car, and that's a big animal. That's a really big turtle, enormous. They are also one of the oldest species of vertebrates or animals with spine and backbone on the earth today. Leatherback sea turtles have pretty much unchanged since the time of dinosaurs. So they were here during that time frame. They're still here now. They're enormous, like I said. They are also called leatherback sea turtles because they do not have a hard shell that most of the other sea turtles have, or that most turtles in general have. Their shell is more kind of a spongy, leathery, rubbery, tough substance. I have not ever seen a leatherback in person. I've only read about them, seen photos, and watched videos of them, but they absolutely fascinate me. They have seen them up in some of the northern seas around the world, which makes them the furthest north dwelling reptile of all reptile species. So quick reminder about reptiles. They are ectotherms, which means they're what we sometimes call cold-blooded. So they need outside sources to help their body stay warm. That's usually the sun, although some reptiles use other things like volcanoes or geothermal heat to keep warm. But leatherbacks somehow have found a way to survive in some pretty cold water, and they've even seen them swimming in seas where there are icebergs, which is pretty remarkable. In addition to being the biggest, the furthest northern dwelling, and one of the oldest species, they also can dive the deepest. They have measured leatherback sea turtles 4,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. And once you are down that deep, it is dark water, it is cold water, and it would be very difficult to navigate down there. But somehow they are able to do it. Leatherback sea turtles also don't have a lot of hard structures in their mouth. No turtles really have teeth, but some have kind of harder bony plates and stuff that help crush food. And leatherbacks do not have that. Their mouth is more soft features. And because of that, they eat softer food items. So they love to eat jellies, sea jellies, jellyfish. Any of those terms describe the same kind of animals. And that is their number one favorite type of food, and usually what they are going after. So they are carnivores that eat very simple creatures like sea jellies. They also have in their mouth and in their throat, they have a series of spines that face backwards. So as they swallow those jellies, which is kind of like, imagine eating a ton of Jell-O, but not being able to really hold it in your mouth or chew it at all. These spines help kind of hold it in place and push it back down instead of having it try to come back up, because that Jell-O's alive and still trying to move and wiggle back out. Moving on to talk about the loggerhead turtles. Just as their name describes, they have a very big head, especially in relation to the rest of their bodies, and compared to similar sized turtles, their heads are enormous. Their heads are very important for them because of what they eat. They mostly live in subtropical and tropical waters, and so warmer water, and they use their big head and strong jaws to crush shellfish. So they love to eat things like snails and maybe some crabs and other hard animals. Sea urchins is something else they can eat, and they can use their really hard jaws and big mouths to crush those animals down as they eat them. They are also they're the most frequently seen turtles in the southeastern parts of the United States. So if you've been in Florida and seen a turtle, it is most likely a loggerhead turtle. So Florida, up the coast through Georgia, the Carolinas, and into Virginia. They've even seen them as far north as New York City. And typically at the end of summer, they are up that far north as that warm current moves up the Gulf, called the Gulf Stream. They sometimes ride that current up the eastern coast of the United States. And then once it gets cold, they get in trouble. And there's a lot of places that do a lot of sea turtle rescue when they get cold stunned or cold shocked, as what they call that when the weather turns cold and they get a little too cold to be able to move. Loggerhead turtles also migrate about 8,000 miles when they are babies. A lot of loggerhead turtles in the Pacific Ocean specifically are hatched from nests on the either coast of Japan and Australia and around that area of Asia. And then they migrate across the Pacific Ocean to the west coast, so places like Baja, Mexico, and areas of Central and South America. For a long time, that was a big mystery of where these turtles go when they were little, because when they hatch, they're just little guys like this, and they'd go off into the ocean, and they wouldn't see any turtles between that size and the adults, and they wondered where they went. And then they figured out that, oh, this is the same kind of turtle species over here in Peru that is hatched over in Australia. So they migrate across the Pacific Ocean when they are babies, which is pretty incredible. I forgot to mention with the leatherbacks, they also swim huge distances. They can swim up to 10,000 miles in a single year, which is great distances. A lot of the leatherbacks in the Atlantic Ocean are born on beaches in West Africa, but then are sometimes over in the Caribbean or South America for a lot of their life. So really crazy how these turtles, a single little animal, or big animal in some cases, can migrate all the way across the oceans during their lifetime. Moving on to talk about the green sea turtles. Green sea turtles are 100% vegetarian. So they eat algae and seagrass. Seagrass is one of their favorite things. So they have to live in areas that are closer to shore because they usually need shallow water for their food to be growing. And given that situation, they are fairly common in the areas, or they're fairly frequently seen in the areas where they live because they are closer to the shoreline. They are called green sea turtles not because they look green on the outside, but they used to be a very important food source for a lot of people, and their fat layers inside their bodies are kind of greenish colored, and scientists think they pick up that green coloration from the food that they eat because they're eating algae and seagrass, which is usually green. They also are able to hold their breath for between 4 to 7 hours, which is kind of common across these species of turtles, but I did find that number specific with the green sea turtles. They are on the bigger side of sea turtles, not as big as a leatherback. Both loggerheads and green sea turtles can be over 300 to 350 pounds and about 4 feet in length. So that's probably the size of like a coffee table in your house. That's a pretty good size sea turtle. They nest in over 80 different countries, and they estimate that they can live over 70 years. One thing that's really cool about sea turtles and some populations of green sea turtles, they come ashore to do other things besides just nest. Particularly the green sea turtles in Hawaii come up on the islands quite often to rest. Living in shallow areas where there's seagrass and algae, they're also kind of getting battered around and pushed around by waves. And sometimes that makes them kind of tired from having to swim and fight the currents a lot. So they will come up onto the shore a little distance and take a little rest, particularly in the sun. When I've been in Hawaii, I've seen sea turtles when I've been out snorkeling. I've also seen sea turtles up on the beach. One of my favorite moments with a green sea turtle, I was snorkeling in an area where a little stream came into the ocean. And so the water there was a bit murky because the fresh water and salt water were mixing, and it became a little cloudy. And I was swimming around this big rock, huge rock, the size of a big car. And as I came across around the bend of the rock, it suddenly got a bit deeper. And as it did that, I could see a shadow of something very big coming up underneath me, and I wasn't sure what that was. Honestly, I was quite scared. I didn't know what to expect. And as it came closer to me, because it was coming up pretty quick, it was a huge green sea turtle, about this big, probably close to 4 feet across as their size can be, and probably close to 300 pounds. And that big sea turtle scared me quite a bit, but didn't try to harm me in any way. But it was really remarkable to be able to see it swimming there in the ocean in Hawaii. One thing I learned really recently, within the last year, is that there are sea turtles here in California, where I live. Particularly green sea turtles are sometimes common in areas around San Diego and Orange County. There's a river that's in Orange County called the San Gabriel River, and that water, as it's close to the ocean, has a lot of seagrass that grows in it. There used to be a power plant there, and it would heat the water up as it put the water back into the ocean that it needed for the power. And that warm water was really important place for sea turtles to kind of warm up, because our oceans here in California are not that warm. And the green sea turtles, they typically live further south down in Mexico, but they do range up as far as kind of the south end of Los Angeles County, and they are often in that space. Last year at the Aquarium of the Pacific, where I work in Long Beach, we were able to successfully help rescue some sea turtles that had some health issues. And one of those was a big green sea turtle female. She weighed in over at 250 pounds, but she was found along a bike path along that river, along the San Gabriel River. And she had come into some bad health situations. And so we took her back to the aquarium, and our veterinary staff did an exam on her to find out what was wrong. They did some x-rays, they did some blood tests, and they found out that she had swallowed a fishing hook. And with that, a bunch of fishing line, and it was stuck in her digestive tract. So the hook was almost all the way to her stomach. The line was stuck in her throat. And they were able to do surgery on her and take that fishing hook and fishing line out. And then we kept her at the aquarium for a couple of months, got her nice and big and healthy again so she could swim around, and was rehydrated. And when she was determined to be in good health, they loaded her up onto a boat, and they put a tracking device on her and drove in the boat a little further south down by San Diego and let her go back into the ocean. And it was really remarkable to see her journey and follow that as she was put back into the ocean and where she went next. And I'm really happy to have worked at an organization that's able to help out wild animals like that. Green sea turtles, they're really amazing animals. Moving on, we're going to talk about the hawksbill sea turtle. Now, these turtles are also fairly frequently seen in the reefs off of Hawaii, because they love to eat the sponges that grow and live on coral reefs. And as their name suggests, hawksbill, they have kind of a narrow, pointy mouth, and that's able to chomp things like sponges and pull them off the coral reefs. And that's one of their favorite things to eat. The hawksbill turtles are almost entirely tropical, so they live in very warm water, and they're kind of a good medium-sized sea turtle. So they're about 3 feet long, and they weigh just about 150 pounds. They have incredibly beautiful shells. Their shells are kind of yellowish golden brown, with a bit of red in them, and really ornate patterns and textures on their shells. And because their shells are very beautiful and people saw those beautiful shells for a long time, that species of sea turtle in particular was hunted for their shells, and they are still considered very endangered, because they've had a hard go of it. Their shells were collected and often sold as something in the jewelry or home decor trade as tortoise shell, which also caused a bit of problem for them to get the protections that they needed, because people were trying to say, oh, you can't sell this is from a sea turtle, and they're like, oh no, it's tortoise shell. And they had to have a lot of really true heart-to-heart talks in getting a lot of people to understand that there were a lot of problems with selling these sea turtle shells. But the hawksbill turtles are really gorgeous. I'll put up some photos of them later on the Facebook profile. Moving on, we're going to talk about some of the smaller sea turtles. The first of which is called the olive ridley sea turtle. Now, these are the species of turtle that we have in our collection at the Aquarium of the Pacific. So they live there. We have 2 boy olive ridley sea turtles, and they are brothers. They actually came from the same clutch of eggs back in the 1990s. They were being smuggled as eggs into the United States from Guatemala. And that's illegal because they're a protected species, and I don't know who was smuggling them. I don't know what they were trying to do, but they seized those in Texas when they were being smuggled back from Guatemala, and they took them to a zoo and incubated them. And once those little turtles started to grow up, they were able to say to other zoos and aquariums, hey, we have some baby turtle or some little sea turtles who would like some. And the Aquarium of the Pacific said, we'll take 2. And they sent them over to us. And so those turtles are now in their mid-20s. And they're about this big, so they can get about 100 pounds. They can get up to about 30 inches. But they're one of the smallest species of sea turtles. And they are omnivores, which means they'll eat just about everything. They love to eat algae, but they'll also eat things like lobster and crabs and shrimp and fish. And that sounds delicious to me. I think all those things sound like a really good meal. Now, olive ridley sea turtles and the next species we'll talk about, Kemp's ridley sea turtles, they do something pretty remarkable with their nesting. And it's called arribada, which is a Spanish word, which I'm probably not pronouncing correctly. Arribada means arrival in Spanish. And when they nest, they all come to shore at the same time and nest in a huge beach. And they all dig their nest, lay their eggs at the same time. For the olive ridley sea turtles, that's usually at night. For the Kemp's ridley sea turtles, that's usually during the day. But in one beach, they've documented as many as 800,000 sea turtles nesting at one time. Now, that was some years ago when there were a lot more turtles, but that's a huge number of sea turtles all coming and nesting at the same time. And science thinks that the sea turtles are able to do this and coordinate this for a couple of big reasons. One, that they're a smaller sea turtle. When they're up on the land, the adults are actually in danger of land predators. These turtles live in the tropical areas around Central and South America. And I know I've seen video footage of a jaguar eating a sea turtle that was trying to lay eggs up on the beach. And so they have to be careful about land predators when they're up on the beach. 2, so it's protection for the adults if more of them are up on the beach at the same time. But it's number 2, it's also protection for all those babies, because if the eggs are all laid at the same time, the eggs are all going to hatch near the same time. And then all those babies, they're going to have a little better chance of survival if there's hundreds and maybe thousands of them all going back into the ocean at the same time. Now, I mentioned that with the olive ridley sea turtles and also the Kemp's Ridley sea turtles. Kemp's Ridley sea turtles were the most recently identified by science as a specific species of sea turtles in 1906. A fisherman from Florida named Richard Kemp wrote up and documented the stuff and sent it to the scientific community to get them officially recognized as a species. Kemp's Ridley sea turtles only live in the Gulf of Mexico and the surrounding Atlantic areas. So Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea, a little bit up the coast of the United States along Florida, and a little bit in South America. That's kind of their only home range. They are among the smallest of all sea turtles, measuring from about 24 inches to about 30 inches, and weighing less than 100 pounds. They love to eat crabs and other similar crunchy things like that. But they're one of the most endangered species because they only live in that small area. And in a lot of their home range, they often are hunted by humans. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment when we talk about some threats. Our last sea turtle species we're going to talk about is called the flatback sea turtle. And if that's an interesting name, it's very descriptive of how they look. Most of the other sea turtles kind of have a slight arch to their backs. The flatbacks are very flat, smooth across the top of them. One interesting thing about them is they are only found in and around the area of Australia and Papua New Guinea. So that's it. That's where they live. They are an omnivore, so they also like to eat lots of different things. They have been documented to eat the most variety of all sorts of sea turtles. They love to eat sea cucumbers, jellies, shrimp, seaweed, mollusk, and different kinds of crabs, and sometimes some fish too. So a wide variety of things that the flatback sea turtles eat. And they're kind of a medium-sized sea turtle. They weigh about 200 pounds, and their shells can be about 40 inches, which is still a good-sized sea turtle, but not as big as the greens, the loggerheads, and definitely not the leatherbacks. So a couple things we can learn about all sea turtles in general. They all breathe air. So they have to come up to the surface to breathe the air. They can't breathe underwater. They can hold their breath a long time, and sometimes that's hours at a time, depending on how deep they go. That can sometimes impact how much they can hold their breath. They also can sleep underwater, and some of them can kind of slow down their metabolism, especially if they go into cold water or deep water, to where they only need to beat their heart maybe 1 beat a minute, which is pretty remarkable. All sea turtles also must come on shore to lay their eggs. As a reptile, they lay eggs. Their eggs are usually about ping pong ball sized. With the leatherback and loggerheads, those eggs are a little bit bigger because they are a bigger sea turtle. But usually about a ping pong ball, and their eggs are pretty round compared to like a chicken egg that's kind of oblong shaped. The sea turtle eggs are usually kind of round, and it's not as hard of a shell, it's more of a soft leathery shell. But they all come on shore to nest. They are all either threatened or endangered. There's many reasons for that, and we'll go over some of those reasons in the future, or in just a moment. Also, there's still a lot we do not know about them. We don't know how long they live, to be honest. They think that all sea turtles probably live about 50 plus years, but we really don't know how long they can live. That's because it's kind of difficult to study one individual from its birth through its lifetime and say, oh, is this a natural death that occurred? Is this truly an average? Is this an extraordinary long-lived or short-lived animal? Could it have lived longer if things didn't prevent it from living as long? All those things have to come into effect when you're measuring a species and its average lifespan. So that's something that science is still working on, is figuring out how long sea turtles live. Also, there's some very interesting theories and some pretty great evidence out there about how sea turtles move around. As an animal that has to come to the surface to breathe air, but also as an animal that migrates across the ocean. And many of the sea turtles, exception of the leatherbacks, they will come back to the same beach to lay their eggs every year. Often that's the beach they hatched from. How do they do that? How do they know how to get back? If a turtle hatched at a beach in Australia and grew up going across the ocean all the way to South America, how did it know to get back to Australia to lay its eggs? And there's some really great theories about that, and one of my favorites, and one that holds a lot of good research and still a little more needs to be done, is that they navigate using the stars. Now that's pretty incredible, to be able to navigate the ocean and kind of control your movements and ride the currents to get back across the ocean. And a lot of people often assume that a reptile is not that smart. And I think that as we learn more, we're going to learn about how smart and capable they are. If you listen to my talk on tortoises, you'll have heard my stories of how the tortoises knew their names and knew me when I was helping take care of them. And they would respond to me in a very different way than other people who knew their names but it didn't work with them. I believe sea turtles are capable of the same thing. I think that they're very intelligent animals and that we misunderstand what they are capable of. There's some really good evidence of them following the stars to help in their navigation. There's also some theories about them having an ability to know where north is, like Earth's magnetic field, being able to read that or interpret that within their own bodies and help understand where things are to control the directions that they try to swim in. That is also pretty fascinating, but we're still learning more about that. Okay, now to talk about some things that may not be so exciting or fun, but it's the threats that sea turtles face. So there's a lot of different things that are causing a lot of problems for sea turtles. All of them, surprise, surprise, are caused by humans. We keep messing up the planet. That's a recurring theme. We need to do better. But one of those big things is problems that start from the moment a sea turtle egg is laid. In some countries, sea turtle eggs are an important part of a food source, especially for indigenous people who may not have a lot to eat. That is a problem that is ongoing, but there are scientists and researchers in place to try to help protect sea turtle nest sites. And especially in communities where sea turtle eggs are being eaten, just as kind of like a fun culinary thing, they're really trying to stop that. Other problems, and this is a big problem in US with sea turtles that nest along Florida and Georgia, South Carolina, are cars that drive on beaches. If you think about the weight of sand on top of a nest, if you drive a car over the top of that, that's going to become a big problem for the sea turtle eggs that are under that sand. That's a huge problem when they let cars drive on beaches, and that's a big problem in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, where a lot of sea turtles nest in the United States. Other places where they've limited that, like Hawaii, they've had an uptick in their numbers of sea turtles. So local laws and regulations can do a lot to help prevent those problems that people have caused. Now, one other problem with the eggs and with the little turtles is from light pollution. So imagine a beach where sea turtles have been laying their eggs for thousands of years. The sea turtles' moms come up at night, lay their eggs, and then turn around and go back to the ocean to go back to her home. And she's maybe used things like the moon or the stars reflecting on the ocean surface to help her get back to the water. And she comes up onto the beach, and maybe there's a big hotel with some bright lights that are new up on the beach. Some of those lights can cause a lot of problems for helping the adult turtles get back to the ocean safely. Now, some of those little baby turtles, when they come out, they may hatch at night, and they would use similar light sources like the moon or the stars is in their instincts to get into the ocean. But if they're confused by lights of hotels or houses that are really close to the beach, that causes a lot of problems for them too. So light pollution is a big problem for nesting turtles. Now there's another big problem for turtles, and that is fishing gear. So sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, the sea turtle the aquarium helped rescue last year had swallowed a big fishing hook, and the fishing line was causing a lot of problems, so she didn't eat enough. But there's also big problems with nets that are used to catch lots of fish, or sometimes shrimp or other animals. And those nets can cause big problems because, like I mentioned, sea turtles have to come up for air. If a sea turtle's on its way up to the surface to get air and suddenly is caught in a net, if it doesn't get free soon enough, it's going to drown. It needs to get to the surface to breathe the air. And that can be a big problem. Now the next problem is something we can all help out with, and that's pollution in the ocean. There's a lot of things here in California. Anything that is on the ground anywhere can end up in the ocean with a couple of days of strong rain. And that's in our forecast coming up. So if you live in the California area or in a coastal area, I encourage you to take a couple of minutes the next few days to clean up around your yard, clean up where you park your car. Take a moment, see if there's any trash lying around, see if there's any chemicals or if your car's dripping oil. All of those things quickly end up in the ocean once it starts raining in California. And that's true in a lot of areas. And you may say, oh, that's not a problem for me. I live in Missouri or Ohio. Well, you're still part of the problem in Missouri or Ohio, because all of that, when it rains, goes into the rivers, and then the rivers all flow down into the ocean. So anything anywhere in the world on land ends up in the ocean at some point or another. Now there are some exceptions. There's some places where rivers don't reach the ocean and you're just causing pollution in your own state, if those rivers don't ever leave your state. But we can all do better about pollution. One way we can do that is make sure that we put trash in its place. Another way we can do that is reduce, reuse, recycle. Now I want to really talk about reduce, specifically with plastics. Quit buying so many things in plastics, especially right now. I know there's a lot of people that are buying a lot of bottled water. Why do you need a bottled water? The water in your tap is usually good to drink. It's safe. Use a reusable water bottle. Quit using so much plastic. It's easy things like that we can all do to make a big difference. Now the final big threat for sea turtles is something else that we can all help out with, and that is temperature changes. So with over 7,780,000,000 people on the planet, if all of us are leaving lights on and driving cars and playing video games, all of that uses energy, right? And most of our energy in most of the world is coming from either burning gas or coal or oil. Those are the big three ways that a lot of people get energy. And all of that produces some pollution, but also causes the temperatures on Earth to rise. And that's well documented. The last 20 years or so, we've seen a lot of big problems with that, and that brings a lot of problems to the ocean. Sea turtles have a very unique process with how they lay their eggs. And when they lay their eggs, the baby inside each egg, it's unknown, or it's not yet determined if that baby is a boy or is a girl. And it gets determined by the temperature that those eggs are incubating. So if a sea turtle lays 100 eggs, we'll use 100 because that's an easy math number, and I'm not so good at math, so we use easy math. If she lays 100 eggs, traditionally, about 50% of those eggs, 50 of the eggs would be boys, 50 of the eggs would be girls. Well, with temperatures on the rise, warmer temperatures mean that more of the eggs are going to be girls. And in a population study that they're doing in Australia, they've documented temperature of sea turtle egg nest going up, and it's gone up 2 to 3 degrees over the last 10 years. And in some of those populations, it is now 70% girl sea turtles and 30% boy sea turtles. And that could become a huge part of a population problem for sea turtles in the future, in that they may not be able to find a mate. If there's that many more girl sea turtles than boy sea turtles, that could become a big problem down the road. So what can we do about this? Again, we need to reduce our use of resources. Doing things that don't take resources, like maybe read a book, or play outside, or play a game with your family or friends. That can be a big saving thing to save some of that energy, to save some of those resources. And if you need to go out shopping, try to do all your shopping in one trip. Go to the grocery store, go to Target, go to the drugstore, all of that in one trip. Saves time, saves resources, and can help save the planet. Well, I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you today about sea turtles. I'll be putting up a lot of really great information on the Facebook profile. Big special shout out to a sea turtle organization called Sea Turtle Conservancy that does a lot of really great work with sea turtles. There's a lot of people doing a lot of really great work. And that's because sea turtles live all around the world. It takes a lot of people to help solve some of the problems. Sea Turtle Conservancy specifically has some really fun stuff on their website about tracking sea turtles. And you can look at individual sea turtles and follow where that turtle goes. Really amazing stuff to see where the sea turtles move around. I hope you've liked what I've shared today. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're having fun. And hang in there. We've got this. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share the content. More will be up on the Facebook profile later today. And these videos will be uploaded to Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. So enjoy, have fun, stay safe. Bye. See you tomorrow.